today. We're super excited to be doing our first Women in Fencing webinar with some of the best fencers from the US and India and referees as well. So we would like to thank all of our panelists for being here and all of you guys for attending. So we decided to do this panel today because we did a camp with the Fencing Association of India, and we found out that fencers could learn a lot from each other's journeys. So we hope that this panel would inspire people. So we hope that our discussion today will leave you with some ideas of how you can overcome your own hurdles, how you can stay motivated and continue to grow, and most importantly, how each one of you can do something to motivate women athletes and fencers. So our format today is going to be some introductions of our panelists, some questions about our panelists' fencing journeys, and then we've picked some questions from the audience, and we'll get through as many of those as we can. Okay, so first, we would like to introduce our panelists. First off, we would like to welcome Iman. She's the 9th ranked foil fencer in the US. She was a 2017 Junior World Team member, and she's an NCAA Women's Foil Champion. Next, we would like to welcome Anna van Brummen. She's the 4th ranked épée fencer in the US. She's a 3-time NCAA champion, and she took first place at the 2016 World Cup. Then we would like to welcome Mariel Zagunis. She's a 2-time Olympic champion. She's a 2-time Olympic bronze medalist, and she's a 4-time Olympian. Next, we would like to welcome Isis Washington. She's the 5th ranked épée fencer in the US. She took first in the 2019 Pan American Games, and she's also the 2019 national champion for women's épée. Then we would like to welcome Chhavi Kohli. She's a 2-time Commonwealth medalist. She's an Indian international fencer, and she got the President's Excellency Award in 2016. And then we would like to welcome Bhavani Devi. She's the first Indian to get first place in a satellite tournament in 2017. She's also the first Indian to make top 16 in World Championships and an 8-time national title holder. Then we would like to welcome Kelly Koehler. She's been a referee since 2004. She's an international referee, and she refereed the gold medal match of women's team foil at World Championships. Then I'll introduce myself. My name's Ketki. I fence épée, and then some of my accomplishments are listed below. I'm Mallika. I also fence épée. Some of my accomplishments are listed below. And today we're going to be moderating our panel, and we're super excited to get started. Okay, so let's get started with a few of the general questions about your guys' journey. So we'll ask our first question to Mariel. So we know that when you started fencing wasn't super popular, especially saber. So how did you get started, and what were some of the difficulties that you faced?
Yeah, so I think my story is pretty common as far as how you start fencing, because especially in the United States, it's like, it always seems like to be a random story, right? So I started fencing because my older brother just wanted to sword fight. I know that you guys started fencing because you were at swimming practice and you just happened to see a fencing class happening. Or I've heard of people looking for one type of workout class and accidentally walking into the wrong room and finding fencing. So it's always like this random thing in the United States, I feel, because fencing is not a very popular sport. So with me personally, I just started fencing because I followed my older brother into it, like I was following him in doing everything when we were younger. And as you mentioned, yeah, when I first started fencing, women actually weren't even allowed to do saber. Like, very few women were actually practicing saber. There were no national or international sanctioned events when I first picked up a foil. So they just put a foil in my hand and said, here, this is what fencing is. And a few years later, when finally the barriers started to be broken down for women to be allowed to fence saber, is when I switched over. And I guess you could say the rest is history.
That's great. Thank you. So Bhavani, you were the first fencer from India who kind of had success internationally. So did you face sort of the same thing as Mariel, or did you have sort of a different story?
Yes, fencing was not that popular in India as well. And when I joined the sport, we did not even have much equipments to train with. we know there is a sport called fencing. When they explained like, so we will be using swords, we'll be using electrical equipments to get the points. But while training, we use sticks because we did not have enough access to get the electrical equipments, and it was very expensive. So we used to keep our equipments only for the competitions and do training with the sticks. So in fact, I had my first electrical bout experience in my first national competition. So that time it was very difficult to feel that kind of, it's different while doing non-electrical matches and doing electrical matches. So that was the first thing we had lacked equipment in our training place. And the second thing is not many women continue the sport after 1 year of sport introduced into my school. It's because many people thought that fencing is dangerous, it is only for men. And of course, we need to travel to training place by bus, and people don't want to travel in the night time for training, so they don't want to go for training, so they quit the sport. And yeah, we don't have any international achievements that year. So I joined fencing because I loved the sport. I enjoyed playing the sport. I did not have any dream about Olympics or international medal like that, but I enjoyed it. So that's why I continued playing the sport, even we did not have enough equipments and facilities here.
Thank you. So to Anna and Isis, so Mariel and Bhavani have kind of been like trailblazers sort of for fencing. So almost 10 years later, I think, do you guys feel that you've kind of have less of these problems, or do you face a completely different set of problems with fencing?
I'll go. I think that everybody's journey through sport is different, and obviously we all come from really different places, and our situations aren't always the same. In my case, of course, I had a different, type of struggle. Initially, I started fencing because I realized that I could be pretty good at it. And, I'm part of a nonprofit organization called the Peter Westbrook Foundation, as well as Iman. And when we first start the sport, we start at a very basic level, and then we're taken out of that level and kind of placed in a more like a developmental path. So they give you a coach, and you start taking group classes, stuff like that. When I started, it was very informal. So I didn't really have a coach or anything like that. And it wasn't necessarily because I was a woman. It was more so because that's just the way it was at the time. And so when I did get a coach and then switch coaches, we come from a very competitive program. So I think that I was one of the only girls that was very serious at the time. And it was hard to be taken seriously because the people that I was training with were so accomplished. They had already made national teams and stuff like that. And I was just someone who was beginning, but, was working really hard. So that was hard for me in the beginning. And I kind of just worked through that, just working like more than anybody at the club, surpassing my peers, people who started at the same time as me, people who started before me. I was just, just kept working, kept grinding. And a lot of it was because I was a girl, and I used to joke around at practice a lot, but I had to really earn my respect. If I was a boy, they would have just, I think, put me to work and just told me what to do. And, it wouldn't have been optional. But for me, I kind of had to do a little bit of that on my own. So I think everybody's journey is different. Mine definitely shaped me as an athlete. But I think that my experience, and even now, I feel like I've earned my respect in that space through the 12 years, 10 or 11 years, whatever, 12 years maybe, I've been fencing. So.
Okay, I'll take it over now for my response. And that is definitely, I think that Bhavani and Mariel have made super amazing strides. So when I grew up fencing, I had plenty of access to other women épée fencers. I was in a very large club, so I had plenty of access to equipment and things like that. So from that sense, I think that it was a different path. Like Isis said, we all have our own paths. But one thing I remember when I was young is at one national tournament, all the girls from my club saw Mariel, and we got together and we have a picture framed and signed by Mariel on our club wall of all the young girls, because it's true, actually, being able to see someone come in, especially when the sport was new, women's saber, and really, like you say, trailblaze, it's an inspiration. And now, in my opinion, I think institutionally in the US, there's a lot of opportunity for women fencers. However, where I find the most setbacks is actually in the respect and the approach of other people in the sport. And so as a women's épée fencer, I hear all the time, like, oh, women's épée, it's so boring. Or for women's foil, I hear that a lot too. So there's definitely a difference in respect shown between men's competitions and women's competitions. And I think it's definitely starting to change. And like Bhavani, like you were saying, how kind of you kept through it because you love the sport. That's how, in my opinion, we can change it, is if we keep just giving extra respect to ourselves, extra respect to our teammates, staying strong and chasing our goals and competing at a high level. I think that's how we really continue to build more respect and really, I guess, make it a more equal playing ground.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Kelly. So as a referee, we know that there are less women referees than men. So what difficulties have you faced as a referee?
I actually got really lucky when I started refereeing nationally. My coach was a referee, and so I knew a lot of people that reffed, and so I had kind of a built-in social circle. I know a lot of the women, when they start, especially national competitions, there's such a social component, and if you're a female, you may not want to join a group of men to go out late at night, and if you're not part of that group, it can be really lonely during the day. So I got really lucky in that way because I knew people and I trusted people, and I was able to develop. It really wasn't until I got to the international level and especially the senior level that I really started to see a big difference. There's the thing that we talk about a lot that can't be talked about enough is representation. Whether it's seeing somebody in your weapon or seeing somebody from your country or seeing somebody from your gender or seeing somebody with the color of your skin or whatever other part of your identity that can make you feel other, when you show up and there aren't that many people or there's no one that looks like you, or you go into the club to practice and you don't have other women to train with, or you go into the club to practice and they tell you women don't do saber. Those things, when you show up somewhere, are really important, that representation. So for me, I had women around me, even if it wasn't in a lot of numbers, until we get to international stuff at the senior level. There's only 8 or 10 referees that are assigned to an event. You have a couple of extras that show up from the locals, and it's pretty common to look at those group referee photos and there's one woman. And that's just how it is. As a woman who has done male-dominated things my entire life, I played baseball growing up. I'm in STEM, I'm a geophysicist, and so I'm constantly in fields that are male-dominated. I'm a little bit more adjusted to it, but one of the problems with that is when a new woman comes in who may not be as comfortable with that, I really consciously have to shift to advocate for a safe space. So things that necessarily weren't a challenge, but you watch other people come in and it is a challenge, is something that I think we all really need to be aware of. For me personally, I have been incredibly lucky in that there was a senior foil referee before me, Natalia Zurayeva from Russia, who was incredibly supportive when I first started showing up to World Cups and my first world championships, and having somebody else who's going through the same thing, who can say women's team when we're getting a little overwhelmed with the amount of men going on in the room, is great. And then I've really been inspired by some of the newer referees coming up too, who come from a culture where you don't accept the inherent sexism in the room that happens when you have so many cultures and it's male dominated, and this is just what we put up with, kind of thing. And these younger women who come from all over the world who walk in and go, that's not cool. And that's been really inspiring for me. Women they're 15, 20 years younger than me, walking in and telling a 60-year-old man what he can go do with himself is pretty inspiring to me. And so I'm really optimistic in that way. But there's also some cultural issues for me as an American woman, because things that I think of as being very unacceptable aren't necessarily unacceptable in other places. So trying to find that line between, I feel like I need to be respected versus what other cultures find to be acceptable, is really hard. Straight up, my favorite experience that kind of gave me a little extra kick at the beginning was after doing my first senior World Cup. I was walking through the bar, and one of the coaches was in there, and he was like, you are very good for a woman. And I was like, okay, thank you, I think. He's like, I am not used to a woman who understands right of way. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take that as a compliment, because I understand right of way. We're on a good roll here. He's like, you are a good woman referee. And I said, well, hopefully someday you will consider me to be a good referee. And a couple of other coaches were hanging around, and they laughed. And this guy was just insistent, no, you are very good for a woman. And to him, this was the biggest compliment he could give. And like, this idea that I would become a great referee at some point, regardless of gender, was so beyond scope that he couldn't even put it into words. But I have become very good friends with the coaches who were around at that time, who supported me. And I've actually since become very good friends with that coach as well, because that's what he came up in. And hopefully we change that as we go. But yeah, there's definitely some differences, and hopefully those are changing slowly. But and I'm happy to see that the next generation is going to have a little bit different of an experience.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So our next question is that it's really great to hear all of your stories, and we know that some of you are taking initiatives to help the youth. So Iman, we know that you run something like this, so could you share the details of that?
Hi guys, thanks for having me on, and thanks for putting this together. So since the Olympic trials stopped in March, and a lot of things stopped, a lot of things shifted, I tried to kind of shift the energy that I was putting into something else that I'm also passionate about. I just spoke about being a part of the Peter Westbrook Foundation, which I'm also a part of, and having been in that program and having been directly influenced by Peter, and Nzinga Prescott, a two-time Olympian, Aaron Smart, a two-time Olympian silver medalist, and Ibtihaj Muhammad, an Olympian and bronze medalist. I was always had the benefit of being inspired by people who looked like me, who motivated me to believe that I could do higher things. And I just had access to fencing in general, to fencing and to good fencers. And so I started what I call the Aspire to Inspire Academy now, possibly the Aspire to Inspire Initiative, which to me has been a collective of projects that aim to increase access to fencing, but kind of totally to elevate people's aspirations through inspiring them using resources that give access to fencing, access to representation, and access to a greater idea of what you can be. And so that's included something that I do on Instagram, which is, this is what a fencer looks like, Instagram Lives. What those are, they're Instagram Lives that I do with other fencers, typically high-level fencers or fencers who have narratives that are interesting, or fencers who just want to share their stories. And it allows the people watching to get a more intimate connection with these fencers. Like Kelly mentioned, it's hard to go to a tournament. It's hard to be at a practice. It's hard to be in an environment where you don't feel represented. And as a Black woman, representation is something that I have not taken for granted, but had the privilege of having throughout my life. And I know that there are many different ways in which people can relate to one another. So it's not just race. Race is important, seeing someone that literally looks like you. But there's race, there's gender, sexuality, where you're from, what weapon you do, when you started doing it, how you started doing it. And my idea was, if I can get people to share their stories, share their struggles, share their accomplishments, and have others listen to it, not only do you feel closer to that person just by hearing their story, you possibly can be inspired and directly inspired and supported by a detail of their life or their narrative that connects with you and who you are, so that you don't feel like it's just you, but that you can see yourself in some way in these other people. Something else I did, the first thing that I did was called the Fundamentals of Fencing Clinic. I'm working to see if I can distribute it through possibly schools or programs in the future, but basically it was an online educational program on fencing, on the diversity in fencing. It was on the history of fencing, the basics of fencing, but most importantly, the diversity in the fencing community. I actually featured Mariel in this because she is a superstar woman and did a lot of trailblazing things. Like people mentioned, well, I don't know if it's been mentioned, but she won 2 Olympic gold medals, among other things, but 2 Olympic gold medals consecutively, including the first Olympic gold medal in women's saber. And so the point of the Fundamentals of Fencing Clinic was not only to teach people fencing, but to teach people fencing who don't see themselves in fencing, and to then show them that they exist in fencing by demonstrating that they're fencers of different races, different genders, who do different weapons, and who come from different places, and who are all pretty amazing. And then finally, something that I've done and that I've been focusing a lot on is creating resources specifically for student athletes. I myself have been fortunate to have opportunities to do really well as a student and as an athlete, both because I was a part of the Peter Westbrook Foundation and I had seen multiple people in my foundation be women's foilists or be fencers who go to Columbia University. So at a young age, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a world team, become an Olympian, I guess, and go to Columbia University, which is not an assertion that I think every Black girl has the privilege of feeling confident in or even making, due to the environment that she might be in that doesn't support those type of aspirations. But also there's a lot of difficulties that student athletes face. I think that especially when you compete at a high level, when you want to, you experience a lot of stress that normal people don't experience, but you also experience a lot of benefits and unique abilities that people don't get when they don't do elite athletics. And so one of my aims is to kind of fill those gaps for people who don't have the Peter Westbrook Foundation, who don't have several people who've gone to the university that they want to go to, who don't have a network of people, who don't understand how to optimize their experience both in high school and in college so that they can get the most out of their education and the most out of their athletic aspirations. So one thing I did most recently is I did a college panel, which was beautiful. I had all of these graduated athletes from universities around the country speak about their experience. And kind of a central thing, this is the thing that I'm going to end on, I'm aiming to create resources that I may not have had that I think that everyone can benefit from. So if I had gone into college and been able to listen to people from many different universities speak about what I could want, how I could see myself in 4 years, what I could be thinking about, how I could exist in college, I would have so many more resources to imagine myself in the future, to see myself as something bigger or something more or something more variable than my specific circumstances or resources might have allowed me to. So that's the entire idea of kind of what I'm doing. Representation, access to information specifically, and resources that you may not have access to, and inspiring excellence, making people believe that they can, giving them more things to consider, to want, and believe that they can want those things and can get those things.
Thank you so much. So Chhavi, we know that you also do TED Talks and stuff. So can you talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me here amongst all the wonderful and beautiful, inspiring ladies. My journey in fencing was, I think I'm very privileged that I did not have any problems like Mariel ma'am or Bhavani Didi, like not having equipments or, the sport being not that famous, right? My struggles in fencing were entirely different. It was a time back in 2017 and beginning of 2018 when I was performing well, and I was not realizing that whilst I was fencing, that how fencing started affecting my mental health. And there were many other external factors which entered my personal space without me realizing that they're taking over my space. Right, before being a fencer, I am Chhavi. Before being a painter, before being a student, whatever it is, I am Chhavi. And I was in the process, I was just forgetting that. So there was a time I'd gone to Newcastle to represent India in the Commonwealth Championship, and I'd won a team bronze medal. My achievement was, and my performance was appreciated, but mostly the reason to stop playing the sport is usually failure. But I had won a medal, and I came back home and I just left my weapon. I just dropped it and said, no, I just can't do it. And I was not able to realize that, what is the issue. And there were days, when I just didn't want to wake up and face the day. I was just feeling so helpless. And maybe it was because my passion had turned into pressure and I didn't realize it. Maybe I had started focusing too much on the results and consequences and what about, what people are expecting out of me, what my parents are. There was never any pressure from my parents. They've been very supportive. But there's something which you start thinking yourself and it's not true. So this overthinking process, letting all the things come and get me, really made me very helpless. So there were days when I used to cry without any reason, and I knew that Chhavi, this is not you. You've been a cheerful person, and what is happening to you? But not at any point was I ashamed or afraid of admitting that I need some professional help. I need counseling. And my parents, my brother, they were very supportive of it, and they asked me to go and take professional help if you need. And I just dropped fencing, and at the peak I was performing well, so everyone around me was so surprised. And the main problem, the main thing which actually affected me was I was not able to tell anyone what's happening to me. I was just not able to explain. I just was not feeling myself. Then I took professional help. I was not doing anything at all. I used to binge eat because of stress, and I was gaining weight. I was not, nothing was in my control. So I took help and I started working on myself. And then I realized that, if you're passionate about something, you should not be worried. You should not be pressurized about it. If I enjoy fencing so much, why was I, taking it as a pressure and not allowing myself to enjoy it? So I just went on this sabbatical from fencing, and it was totally unplanned. It was, I never knew if I was going to come back to fence or not. But deep inside my heart, there was some place, that I knew that one day I may be fence. I don't have such big dreams that I want to do this and do that. After this phase of, recovering from that position, I realized that the most important thing for me is to do what I'm passionate about every day. And not to worry about what's going to be the consequence of playing fencing, competing at higher levels or not competing. It's just looking forward to the next day to do what I'm passionate about, and I am passionate about fencing. Personifying fencing, if you love somebody just like I love fencing, you cannot lie to that person. I cannot lie. I just could not lie to fencing. So I knew that I'm not being honest with the sport, so I should just drop it. So I took this break. It was a year and a half, more than that. And I returned, and I had a totally different mindset about fencing. I was playing it as a sport that I loved and something that I enjoyed. And I started taking myself a little lightly. That it's totally all right to not feel like playing more bouts, to not go for fencing training today, because I'm sure that the next day I'll be double enthusiastic about going and competing. So I think, it's very important to realize that, if you're passionate about something, passion and love is at one place, and, starting worrying and taking pressures about it is gonna like, create troubles for you. So you have to be very honest with it. And it's all right to, not feel okay and not be embarrassed and not be ashamed about, feeling bad or feeling sad, feeling low. And it's the thing I really, I can't stress enough on that, how people neglect their mental health. They just completely ignore. It's very good to, look after yourself, keep yourself fit, but it's equally important to keep your mental health fit. People don't realize, people achieving so many great things, they feel unsatisfied, they don't feel very happy. So it's about, it's about the journey, and rather not worrying about the consequences and the results altogether. The journey, you need to enjoy it, you need to realize it, you need to be a part of it.
That was really great advice. Thank you, Chhavi. So now we would like to move on to questions that we've gotten from our audience. So our first question, we'll ask it to Isis, is how has sports, especially fencing, shaped women or helped them express themselves more?
So that's a great question. As we know, sports are a huge part of everyday society. We know that, the Olympics specifically stands for much more than a sporting event, and it brings people together from all over the world. We also know that women in many sports wasn't really accepted until recently. So when you think about that in itself, just the idea of me or anyone else stepping on a strip or onto a field or onto a court is so important, because women are always at the forefront of change in any movement. And so I think that when it comes to like women and being free as a whole and being able to do what we want to do, sports plays a huge part in that, because we've proven time and time again through sport that, we are equal, we are adequate, and in most cases, in a lot of cases, we work hard, we work harder, we face more adversity as women. And that's so powerful in itself. When you think about, if you think about back in the day, and not even that long ago, it wasn't really accepted for women to be fencers outside of foil. The other weapons really didn't come along until later. And it wasn't, accepted for women to be weightlifters or want to play baseball or anything like that. These are all very new concepts that we've been able we've been afforded through the success of other female athletes. As we know, like some of the best, if I ask anyone in here, who's one of the top athletes in the world, a lot of the time it's going to be men or women. It's going to be a woman who says, they're going to say a woman. Like one woman is always going to pop up in your mind, because we are we are high achievers. And I think that the reason being is because we've had to face so much, adversity as women. So freedom is something that we've always worked towards, and we've always been able to, fight for. And sports is a huge part of that.
Thank you so much, Isis. So our next question is submitted by C. Sai Renuka, and it's, my school doesn't teach fencing because it's not popular where I'm from. So how do you start fencing, and how can we make fencing more accessible to everyone? Iman, do you want to take this one?
Honestly, that's a challenge I think a lot of people face. And to fence at a high level, I do think takes a lot of resources that can't exactly be provided without financial support, without a club, without access to some sort of equipment and other people fencing. I think fencing is what you can't do by yourself. But I think after speaking to a lot of people and having done a lot of interviews, I think one big thing that can happen is clubs that are already established could possibly provide at least like 1 day a week where they allow people who aren't necessarily part of the club to just come in and try fencing. Like kind of like the Peter Westbrook Foundation has a Saturday program that's really inexpensive, and they just teach kids how to fence during that program, and it allows people to have access to fencing, even if it's not at, may not be an Olympic fencer one day, you can still engage in the sport and enjoy the sport and enjoy a community where fencing exists. I think additionally, I know Nzinga is pushing in New York and in the United States to have, I believe, sports departments within the government system to better fund programs for kids to be able to access sports like fencing and sports, I guess, like squash and things like that. And so I think if there was more funding from a federal level, in addition to the creation of more recreational access to fencing, that might be helpful. So again, even if you don't have an entire fencing club, if you had a recreational center near you, if they offered some form of fencing training or fencing practice in the way that they might offer basketball or tennis or other sports like that, it would be just helpful to integrate fencing into a more accessible environment. So to conclude, I know a lot of schools don't have fencing, but potentially if we had more community programs that would include fencing, it would give people like whoever asked this question access to fencing to be able to participate in the sport and to enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Our next question was submitted by Manya, and she would like to know, how do you keep yourself motivated and not give up? So Chhavi, do you want to take this one?
It's a very good question. And I believe, totally my opinion, that, motivation is something which is not there with you the entire time. It comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. So it's important to realize that, motivation is something that should be, that should come from something that you're passionate about. Whether it's entirely your result based or it is something that you do which just makes you happy. So it's motivation. Like for me, if I have to keep myself motivated, first of all, I just focus on the things which I like to do, which I'm not forced to do, because some things that you are supposed to do. But like fencing and my painting, or I like to read books, it's a motivation, it's a drive which makes me do it because I feel happy about it. And sometimes when I am not motivated enough to go and have my fencing training or hit the gym or paint, so I just don't force myself that, you have to do it. Because if you're not, willing to do it from within, nobody can come up, and hand you the weapon and ask you to, go and play or just go and paint. You will not be able to do it. So it's about, taking it easy and doing what you're passionate about. Sometimes, of course, you need to push yourself, because not every time you can just sit down and expect good results. You need to work hard for it. But there are days when you don't feel motivated enough. So it's totally all right, because it's not something which is there with you every day. It comes and it goes, and you need to be, flexible with it.
Thank you, Chhavi. That was some really great advice. So our next question is submitted by Yashodhar Gulati, and he wants to know if it's more difficult for women to come up on an international stage as compared to men, or has the platform provided equal opportunities to all? Anna, would you like to take this one?
Definitely. And so actually my answer for this question is going to be kind of similar to my answer for the last one, which was that institutionally, there's definitely, at least in the US, there's pretty equal access to competing internationally. You'll see, in order to compete in an international competition, you sign up on the website. If you're highly ranked enough, you're selected to go, and it's equal number for men and women. So based on that level, it's really gotten to a place where we're on very similar playing grounds. However, where the issues come is through the international travel. Because I know as a young woman or a young girl, even when I started going to these tournaments, it was very difficult, especially to be on my own before I really knew many of the people. There were times where I traveled to countries by myself and I did not feel safe. And I might have gotten lost somewhere, and I felt very alone and very isolated. And I do think as a female that is much more magnified. You're much more aware of your own vulnerability. You're much more aware of the people around you, etc. And I definitely think so. The way forward from that, however, is for just the women that are competing to really kind of form community and band together, to travel together, to do things like that together. That's how we can really continue to come up on international levels. Because a lot of other countries, make sure everything is you're not responsible for booking your own stuff. They all live in the same place. They train in the same place. They go together. Like, a lot of the different, maybe European countries, they have their training centers. They have the head of their federations who organize for them to go places. But in the US, you're really alone when you're planning all this stuff. When you choose to compete, you're doing it on a very individual level. So I guess there's a way to, even if it's not from the organization, I know now whenever I travel, I reach out to some of the other girls I'm traveling with and say, what flight are you on? I'm going to try to book through. We're going to try to go through the same places, just to make sure that when we're traveling, it doesn't feel as overwhelming as it can. And so this is a huge part. And because when you're fencing on an international scale, you have at least 8 World Cups / Grand Prix a year and all over the world. So you have to really be able to go to all these countries where it's very different in respect to how women are treated, how women are expected to behave. And so really banding together with your teammates and the other female competitors, even from other countries, is how I think really women can establish a strong international career.
Thank you so much for sharing. Our next question was submitted by Mohima. So she said that most women in her country have no scope of fencing and they have limited exposure. So can you please help her by sharing some ideas on how to improve this situation? So Bhavani, would you like to take this one?
Yeah. So actually, even when I started fencing, like I said, even from the second year, many women stopped the sport because they thought it's dangerous. They thought it's not safe for women. And also many, after I started playing the sport, when I started traveling international alone, many parents and also from my relatives always tell to my parents that why you're taking risk, why you're allowing your daughter alone for competition. There is no future in the sport and no one is supporting, and so many things. They always want me to focus on to get a job and to get married and all those things. So I always, and my parents were so good and they were so supportive from the day of my fencing career until now. I'm very grateful for them. I think it's the culture in India that women in a sports field cannot stay for a longer period like men. So they can play in sports in schools and colleges, and after finishing the college, they have to get a job. After getting a job, they have to get married. So this is the mindset we still have in our country. But many women athletes are changing that with their achievements. So I started fencing with my school. Even today in my district, this is the only school that has some basic fencing equipments in it. So I think, of course, there will be lots of struggles, lots of obstacles that will come on your way. I don't know, that something that kept me going is the love for the sport and the passion to do something in the sport, and the support from my parents, of course. So I think we need to start fencing from all the schools, and especially in the women's school. So I studied in a girls' school. So we need to include fencing as a small subject to all the girl children. And yes, we need support from the government and corporate companies for sponsor, because fencing is an expensive sport. We need financial support to travel for competitions, to go abroad for training, etc. And for the equipments, especially without equipments, you can't do anything in fencing. So I think, yes, we need to be very strong with our decision. We need to take one step forward, because when I started fencing, there were no corporate companies supporting fencing. But Go Sports Foundation was the first one to support me from other than the government. So right now, they already have more than 10 fencers in their scholarship scheme. So it is because I took that first step without, not following the decision of the society which it kept for women. So that for one step, I've changed many fencers' career because many women athletes are in the scholarship team. I think we have to be very strong with ourselves, with our decision. Whether we are getting the result or not, we have to keep going for the love for the sport. And I'm very sure you will get the support on your way. So we need to take that one step forward, facing all those tough situations.
Thank you so much, Bhavani. So our next question is to Mariel. So fencing has given you a lot of fame and admiration in life, but what sacrifices did you make to reach this level? And then, unfortunately, we do not know who submitted this question, but.
Yeah, that's a really good question that I actually get asked a lot because, there is a lot that you have to sacrifice in order to reach your goals, whether that's becoming an Olympic gold medalist or becoming, the best in your field, whatever that is, or just dedicating yourself to whatever it is that your hobbies are and stuff. Like it takes a lot of dedication. You can't just wake up one day and say, oh, like this is what I want to do and I'm just going to snap my fingers and it's going to happen. It takes a long game to really work towards those goals and to overcome the inevitable obstacles that are going to stand in your way. And so for me personally, like it required from very early on a lot of sacrifice and dedication as far as my personal time went. And when you're a 10-year-old girl and going through middle school, high school and stuff like that, it can just seem like the end of the world that you're missing out on so many social aspects because your attention is focused in other areas. And for me, that was fencing, and that was traveling nationally and internationally and just missing out on a lot of things as a kid that I just thought were really unfair. But fencing also was such a big goal of mine. It was such a big focus that, I could just look back and say pretty much immediately, this didn't even take a lot of hindsight, but pretty much immediately I said, yeah, it really makes me upset that I'm missing my senior prom, but I'm also getting to travel all around the world and do this really cool thing and eventually set myself up for to make an Olympic team and stuff like that. So it was definitely difficult in the moment to kind of weigh the option of like, do I want a normal teenage life or do I want to go on this completely unique path? And so it was just kind of a give and take for me. And you just have to look at the cost analysis of like, what am I giving up on one side of things to achieve what I really want to and what the goals that I've set for myself on the other side of things. So yeah, of course, anything that's worth it is going to be worth the sacrifice. And, for any of us on this panel, I think it's no exception to know that there are going to be some hardships and there's going to be some tough emotional decisions for yourself. But, you step back and ask yourself, is this goal worth it? And for me, most of the time it was. So without a doubt, there were definitely some sacrifices and hardships as far as, having to put all of my focus and attention into fencing for a majority of my life. But again, it kind of paid off. And what Chhavi was talking about as far as being motivated and wanting to make sure that you're wanting to do it every day, that also goes hand in hand with what I'm talking about, because sometimes you do have to push through in order to reach those goals. But, it's if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So you just have to remember what your goals are and just keep striving for them. But at the same time, staying true to yourself. Don't overdo it, of course. But of course, there's going to be sacrifices that you have to make, and it's not going to be fun some of the time. But when you're standing on the top of the podium, then you realize that all of those sacrifices and hardships were worth it.
Thank you so much. I guess we have time for one more question. So our last question will be to Kelly. So what future do you see for women in fencing?
I think that right now we're really focused on numbers. We look and we see like there's this many of entries in a women's event and there's this many in the men's event. We look at the referees and say there's this many women and there's this many men. I think the future is so much brighter than focusing on numbers. I think our future is a place where people can come to the sport and stay as long as they want. we do have an issue with women being seen as terminating at some point, right? That, you know, we do this to go to college or, you know, for the educational aspect, and then you're supposed to move on. Being a professional athlete as a woman, especially in a minority sport, is a difficult road to go through funding and to go through the support that you get in everyday life. I think we're going to go to a point where things like, I want to have a family, actually becomes incorporated in that process and isn't a reason to leave. Things like, you know, making decisions about your career, and those things will actually be a discussion that we can all have, instead of this assumption that everybody shows up, focuses on this thing, and then they're able to, you know, while you're here, that's all you're doing, and then you can eventually go do other things, but that you leave the sport behind. And I think as soon as we develop that conversation, it becomes so much more accessible for women to stay in it long term. And then also you're getting more coaches, you're getting more referees, because the involvement can stay there. So I think that's how we actually get the numbers. And I think it's right. I think those conversations are already starting. And they're starting all over the world. So I think we've got a lot of really good things to look forward to.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So that's all the questions that we have for today. But we would like to thank all of our panelists for coming and giving us such really great advice. And we would like to thank Kaizen Academy and Kevin and Coach Yasser for attending. We'd also like to thank the Fencing Association of India for getting our great fencers from India. And also a big thank you to Iman, because she helped us set this up, getting our Zoom webinar and things like that. We were like such a mess before, and she kind of got everything in order for us. So yeah, thank you guys.
Hold on, wait. Can we all just smile so you can have a screenshot of the panelists, if that's cool with everyone? I guess not if you're cool. Not if you're cool with the screenshot. I'm gonna take that as yes because people are smiling. Okay, hold on. Everyone smile in 3, 2, 1. There it is. All right.
Yeah, thanks you guys for organizing this. This was a really cool opportunity. And to Ketki and Mallika, also congratulations on getting the U.S. Fencing Spirit of Sport Award. That was very exciting.
Thank you.
Very nicely done.
Congratulations.
You girls did an amazing job, and I know how, you were so exhausted all the time and texting me that, Chhavi, what is this? This is so confusing. How do we go about this? So I actually saw all your hard work, and amazing. Kudos to both of you. And thank you, everyone. It's been an honor sitting here having this discussion.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciated you guys' narratives, Chhavi and Bhavani. I thought it was like super insightful. I haven't personally experienced, I haven't met you guys, and I don't know a lot of fencers from India, so it was very inspiring to hear you guys' stories, and hopefully you can, other Indian girls can have fencing programs in the future, because you guys seem to be great, inspiring role models for them.
Yeah, I also want to say real fast, Chhavi, it was really cool for me to hear your story, because I went through the exact same thing that you were talking about with intermixing or losing your passion and replacing it with pressure. And so
Yes.
I definitely plan on going and listening to your TED Talk, because that's a huge...
I'm so sorry, but it's in my regional language.
Okay.
We'll see the passion on your face and just know.
Mm-hmm. I'll get it.
But that's okay. We could have a talk. We could generally talk about your experience and mine too. I would love to have that talk.
Okay, well, it was very cool hearing your side. So definitely.
And I feel like that was perfectly complemented with Bhavani's story of not having, of not having a lot of resources, but still like having so much passion and perseverance through your circumstances. Like that was very inspiring. Like, I have lots of resources, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm just tired today. But it's like, what are you willing to do to get to where you want to be and to pursue your passion? So that was that motivated me to get up my booty and to work.
Yeah. And I think that's the way forward for women in fencing, is to embrace that passion, not to lose it.
Many states, But now the change is that many women are taking up the sport because they already seen them as they won medal the Olympic or at the international podium. Because before we never know how to reach a podium in the international competitions. But
Exactly.
right now,
At least people have now started dreaming about it.
yeah. So they are happy to do it even with those difficult situations. Actually, I forgot to add one thing. Mariel was my inspiration to aim for Olympics. So when I had the opportunity to train with her in Portland, that was the greatest thing that fencing has given to me, because you see one person as a inspiration, as a role model, and you got to train with her for the same dream. So that is something amazing that fencing has given me.
No, Bhavani, you're welcome back here anytime. I had a lot of fun training with you when you're here, and I'm glad to be that inspiration for you. But I also do want to say that it is incredible to see how hard you worked when you were here, and you continue to work, and that is really paying off, and you're paving the way for all of the fencers in India. I mean, I've been so excited to watch you grow with your results. And I also just want to add that everybody on this panel is very inspiring. I mean, it just hits home every single topic that everybody's talking about. And I think it's great that we have all of this, passion and motivation to make sure that women are included and that they're represented. And if they're not, then we're going to make it so, with the Iman's program and what Isis was saying, sometimes you have to be the change, and you just gotta, you gotta step up and represent. And I loved what Kelly was saying too about, if you are already somebody who's there and has already taken, started this trailblazing or taken some steps forward in the right direction, to welcome with open arms those women who are trying to do the same thing or trying to improve upon the situation as well. So I think it's really great to hear all of these different aspects from a referee perspective, from a fencing perspective, from a female perspective, all of those things. I think it's amazing to hear each of you speak about your experiences, but also what everybody's doing in order to forward the movement and to keep it going and to keep this motivation going, and just get the representation and get the get the, not just the numbers like Kelly said, but just to make it more of the norm, because I think that that's what we're shooting for. We don't want to make it the exception that women are doing all of these things and being represented at a certain percentage, but we want to make it the norm, and we can all help each other do that. So it's really great listening to all of you speak today.
Thank you so much to everyone. You guys shared your amazing stories, and it's such an inspiration to all of us. So thank you again.
Bye.